Alright, so Georgia's basketball season just ended 72 hours ago. The off season now is here. They have been 3 days maybe in the off season. It is time. I do not know. This probably will be released today. But if it does not, then at the time there is no news on transferring and everything. But I believe I just need to go ahead and release this today. Um, it is time for the state of the program 2024. We did this in 2022. We did it 23. It's time to do it in 24. And when I did this last year, I never would have thought that Georgia would have another 20-win season and make the semifinals of the NIT, which for all the haters, Seton Hall won the NIT championship. They beat Indiana State 79-77. So at least Georgia lost to the eventual champions of the NIT. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just saying that people were acting like it was not a big deal for Georgia to beat the NIT. Even Georgia fans were saying it wasn't a big deal, and that just absolutely just broke my heart. But anyway, we'll talk about NIT in a minute. Where do we start? It started on a trip to. Well, they did release a few games before, but it all started on a trip to Italy, and I covered all three of those games on this channel, and it was something odd. It's something I've never had to do before. It's because I was talking about these games I had not watched. I was not able to watch. I was talking about them based off of what the university put out in articles and pictures and videos. So it was very, very it was very different. I had never had the chance to do that before. And not to mention I was greatly sick. I mean, I'm greatly sick now, but it was really worse back in July or so. I mean, I could not even walk. Now, I'm not sick because I can't walk now. I have different issues going on. But to me, the Italy trip, and I'm not a part of the team, so I wasn't there. I'm just going based off of my nostalgia from covering these games and talking about them. And you've heard players say it. I've heard players say it. I've heard coaches say it. That was a wonderful, wonderful trip. And to me, Georgia won all three games. So shoot, yes, it was a wonderful trip. And more importantly, the players and coaches got to go out and see stuff they had never seen before. Stuff that I probably never will even see. It was a wonderful trip. So the trip to Italy happens, and Georgia wins all three games. Then slowly after that, when they return home, it was a few weeks of nothing. Then you start to hear scheduling starting to come out. Now, before the Italy trip, you did hear a few scheduling games. More specifically, I believe it was they had North Florida scheduled, Mount St. Mary's, and Alabama A&M. In Oregon in the Las Vegas opener game, the Legends Classic. And then you start to hear more games being scheduled. You hear they're going to play Georgia Tech on a certain date. You hear they're going to play Florida State in the SEC ACC Challenge. And then eventually in early September or early October, the entire conference, the entire schedule drops. And I remember talking about the full schedule, and I never imagined having Georgia. Being a fan, I said Georgia could win the national championship. But if you're looking at realistically, I didn't have Georgia at 20 wins. I had us maybe at 18 to 19 wins, somewhere almost to 20. And then maybe making the NCAA tournament and going on a run. But the season started with a loss versus Oregon. I mean, with the way the season would have started 0-1 at Oregon, you're like, well, what's next? And then they beat Wake Forest. They beat North Carolina Central. and then they go to the Bahamas where they unfortunately go 2-0, which if they unfortunately go 0-2, and it's like, man, if we knew what was going to happen, in the Bahamas, I mean, Georgia had a great. Going back looking on those games, Georgia had a wonderful chance to win those games. They unfortunately did not, and that's okay because Miami was really good at the time, and Providence was really good at the time too. So Georgia went 0-2 at the Bahamas. Then they beat Winthrop. Then they went to Tallahassee and upset Florida State, which perhaps is still the biggest win of the year, depending on who you ask. And then they had a very, very busy December. They beat Mercer, Georgia Tech, High Point, Mount St. Mary's, North Florida, and they ended conference play versus Alabama A&M. If you're asking what the biggest takeaway from non-conference play was for me, and it was that they, of course, the 10-game winning streak, but the fact they did manage. They were down 13 to 15 points against Florida State, and the fact they came back like that, it was just absolutely crazy. I remember listening to the game, like, there's no way Georgia's going to come back and win this game, and that's the difference between this year's team, and a team 2 or 3 years ago. A team 2 or 3 years ago would have not came back and won that game. And I know, take that with whatever you mean. I'm just saying, they probably would have not came back at the 2000. As much as I love the 21-22 team, I love all the players on that team. I absolutely think the world of Braylon Bridges and Aaron Cook and Cario Aquino and Dalen Reginald. All the players, I love very much all the players on that team. They probably would have not came back and won that game, and that's not a player problem. That was a coaching problem. That was a coach's problem. They probably would have not came back and won that game. And on the top 5, that Florida State game definitely would be up there and one of the top 5 best moments for the year. Of course, you know what happened. Justin Hill, Georgia comes back. Justin Hill hits a long 2-pointer, and then Ohio State heaves up a buzzer beater brick. And Georgia came back and won that game. They were down at least, I think, 17 points or something like that. So Georgia had to claw and fight back to win that game. They did. Okay, and then after they played Alabama A&M, a conference play started. Georgia would then beat Missouri in a game where Georgia went away. It was a 15-16 or nothing run, and Missouri answered one back. And Tigers took the lead for a little bit there, and then Georgia had to come back and win. And 75-68, so you're thinking, oh my God, Georgia just won a road SEC conference game. Like, that is absolutely crazy to think about. They're 1-0 in SEC play. And then they return home to Stegeman Coliseum, and they beat Arkansas, a team that they rarely beat. Georgia had not beat Arkansas since the 2019-20 season. I believe since the Anthony Edwards year. They beat Arkansas 76-66. You're at 2-0. Like, you're doing really, really good, and you're doing better than what the experts had you at. That's for sure. And then the changing point of the season, Georgia almost upsets number 5 Tennessee 85-79. The Vols came back with about 5 minutes left, 6 or 5 minutes left. Blue Cane hit a deep three with about 6:32 left in the ball game. And after that, Tennessee just came back. Dalton Knecht had a whopping 37 points, I think it was. 39 or 37 points in that game. That game hurt Georgia a lot, and to me, as great of a season this was, that's what people are going to look at. They're going to look at the games against Alabama, Tennessee, a few Mississippi State, South Carolina as well. I mean, and Coach White said this during the post-game interview against Seton Hall Tuesday. If Georgia won at least one or two of those games, Georgia would have been in the NCAA tournament. You cannot tell me if Georgia does not beat number 5 Tennessee and then beat Alabama, or just hang on and win one of those games. Tennessee, yes, and then maybe Alabama or Mississippi State. Georgia would have been in the NCAA tournament. So to a lot of people, that is what makes them mad about this season. To me, postseason's postseason, right? Georgia finally got to play in postseason basketball. I will finish that thought. Let's look at the rest of January, and then Georgia would go on the road again and come back and beat South Carolina 74-69. Georgia struggled a lot in that game, and the fact they were able to come back and win that game was pretty impressive. And then they go on the road to play Kentucky, and this will be a game I will never forget. And they lose to Kentucky 105-96. Big Z Ivicic had, that was his debut game, Zamir Ivicic, and dude, I mean, he absolutely just balled out on Georgia. I mean, he came into the game. He got a block shot at a 2-pointer on the other way. Then he hit a free, a defensive stop. He hit another free. I think Georgia finally made a bucket. He kicked it out for it, and one of the Kentucky players hit him into the corner for a 3-pointer. I mean, I could never think of a moment, and I know it's a regular season game in Kentucky basketball. Quote unquote has standards. I can never think of another game. And I've watched many Kentucky basketball games. I cannot think of a game where a regular season game where Rump Arena was that loud. I mean, that was a crazy moment. And what's also crazy is the fact Georgia almost came back and won that game. Georgia had a huge second half, more specifically a huge last 10 minutes. I personally feel like if Georgia would have had, if basketball was a 60-minute game instead of 40, if Georgia had 20 more minutes, they probably could have came back and maybe not won, but they probably could have gave Kentucky a fight for their money at the end of the game. It was very impressive how Georgia came back in that game. After Kentucky, they came back to Stegeman Coliseum. They played LSU. LSU led majority of the night. Georgia took the lead late. And then Russell Chewa, Jabri Abdur-Rahim misses a 3-pointer. Big Russell Chewa got the rebound and then laid it up and got fouled. Georgia wins that game 66-68. LSU heaved up a full court. They passed it full court. He got a wonderful look from free. He dang near almost hit that sucker. They almost won that game. For me, this proves it proved to me that this team was, going to give a lot of other people for their money. I mean, looking at this stretch of games, at this point, Georgia would have been, 3, 2. At this time, Georgia was about 3-2 in conference play, so they looked really, really good. And after LSU, they went to the O'Connell. The O'Connell Center to play the Florida Gators, and perhaps the craziest college basketball game I have ever watched. Florida goes to halftime at one point. They led by 20 points and more. I think I got to click it and see what it was. They led by 21 points, and slowly but steady in the second half, Georgia claws its way back. I mean, you're thinking, it's 11 with about 5 minutes left. You're thinking, well, okay, at least we could trim it down to double digits. Georgia comes all the way back and has a chance to win the game on the very last second. Florida heaved up a horrible shot, and Georgia got the rebound with about 15 seconds or so, and they ran it down the court, and unfortunately, we lost the ball going down the court, and then we had to go to overtime, and after that, it was kind of over. Florida took that momentum, and they won the game in overtime, but to come back from 21 points down and send it to overtime, I mean, that was just absolutely crazy. I cannot think of a team I like who has did that, and that is very, very impressive. I could not think of a team I like that was down 21 points and was dead in the water, and then eventually just comes back from the dead and ties the game and arguably should have won it. To me, out of all the performances Georgia had, that might have been the most impressive. I know it was not a win, but I mean, they came back from 21 points down. What else can you ask for? After that game, they went on. They went back to Stegeman Coliseum. They played Alabama in a game they led. This is the story of our team this year. We would have wonderful first halves, but sluggish second halves. And unfortunately, they did have a sluggish second half against Alabama. And correct Alabama because they're in the Final Four now. So, I mean, that loss does not look as bad as people think it is. It's one Georgia should have won, though. They were up comfortably in the first half. Really, in the second half, until about 9 minutes left. Alabama came back, and then after that, the rest was history. They took the lead, and then Georgia could never get it back. Georgia lost to South Carolina at home, 72-62. Georgia lost to Mississippi State, 75-62. Georgia lost to Arkansas, 78-75, which probably was one of the most heartbreaking games of the year. Georgia took the lead very, very late in the game with about, I think, 3 minutes left. Arkansas would then take the lead. Georgia actually got a steal. They were down 2. They actually got a steal, and then unfortunately we missed a three-pointer on the other side. Arkansas would then go on to get the rebounds and stuff, and after that you're like, well, okay, foul games and stuff. Georgia lost to Florida 88-82. Georgia finally got a win in Nashville versus Vanderbilt 76-64. Georgia got beat by Auburn 97-76. Georgia LSU beat Georgia in Baton Rouge 67-66. It's probably the worst game I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I still do not know how you do not call that call. I never blame referees for my team losing. I think that is some a whiny crap right there, man. I don't agree with people who do that, but the one exception for me is that game. I have no idea how you do not call that foul at the end of that game, but Georgia had plenty of chances that if we didn't start slow, we probably could have won that game. But after that, we lose to Texas A&M. We beat Ole Miss, and then we get beat by Auburn again to end the regular season. So at this point, you're thinking unless something happens that we're going to have to win at least 3 or 4 games to make the NCAA tournament. You're thinking, because I'm so tired of Georgia playing and being out on the first night. So you're thinking maybe we can win a game. We're not out on the first night. Maybe we win 2 games, and then we can see what happens from there. Georgia beat Missouri 64-59 in its first round win since the COVID year, 1920. Before COVID, they beat Ole Miss, and it felt really good. Now, arguably, Georgia had a great first half and started very, very slow in the second half, and it dang near almost cost them the game. But I was very proud of that team, man. Justin Hill had a great day that day. It was a game where I am very happy Georgia won that game. I feel like if Georgia would have lost that game, NIT, moving forward positively for next year, I don't think we're having that conversation if Georgia does not win that game. So it was a wonderful game indeed. That was the entire March was very sleepless for me. God, I had it rough a few times. I mean, I was staying up to 4:30 in the morning every night, man, for a few weeks, not getting no sleep at all. It was kind of rough. And then they played Florida in the second round. Florida beat Georgia 85-80. And at the time, we thought that was going to be Georgia's last game of the season. We were like, well, okay, we had a good run. We won one game. We could build on that next year. Florida had to come back and win that game as well. Georgia made a few runs very, very late in the game. Unfortunately, it was all just too late. And then, so I stayed up to 3:30 in the morning for that game, and it was a little longer than that because I know I had to. I thought it was the last game of the year. Then Friday comes, and then the day after the SEC, Georgia's exit in the SEC tournament, you're hearing reports of teams opting out of the NIT. You hear Ole Miss opted out, Pittsburgh opted out, Oklahoma opted out. And then you start to hear that if Georgia could be in the NIT, they need a few things to go there. They need a few things. I think Texas A&M needed to beat Kentucky. They did. And then you start to hear reports that Georgia's playing in the NIT. My first initial thought was, how am I about to get my heart broke? Because even though people were right on it, I did not believe it. I was like, never seen Georgia play a postseason. It's been a long time since I was not really even young enough to remember that game in 2016. So I was really like, I have never seen Georgia play postseason basketball. Do not be screwing with me now. If Georgia's playing postseason, I was not gonna believe nothing until Sunday night. And I will tell you that, and that's also when my health problems started. I will tell you that was the longest 2 nights of my life, from Friday night to Saturday night. Those days were the longest days of my life. I mean, I was sitting there, man. I was bonkers. I mean, I can't explain it. Like, I truly was I'm ready for Sunday night. And then Georgia gets announced they're playing in NIT, and they will be hosting Xavier. And to me, it's like, oh my God, Georgia's finally playing postseason basketball. And, God, it was fun. The entire NIT run, although how it ended was very, very disheartening and sad, the entire NIT run was so fun, man. Georgia would then, as I said, play Xavier. And, boy, this was the game. Georgia led by most. It was like 21 points in the second half with about 10 minutes left. And then Georgia went on a scoreless drought as Xavier went on a huge run. And the most they got, they tied it. And then Elias Demery hit a layup with about 28 seconds left to give Georgia the lead. And then a bunch of wacky clock stuff happened, and Xavier had a chance to win with 1.2 left, and Big Russell Chiwa with the block of the year, blocked the shot. And you're dancing. Georgia is advancing to the second round of the NIT tournament. And they had to beat Wake Forest, a team they beat in the regular season, but a team they lost to at Wake Forest the last season. And you're thinking, okay, we won one game. It's going to be very difficult to go on the road and beat Wake Forest. They did. They beat Wake Forest 72-66. And then they're going to Ohio State, and then you're like, oh my God. I mean, we've been hungry for one postseason win. We've won 2 postseason games. And then you're like, if they could beat Ohio State, man, they have a real shot to win the championship. And I'll be dang, they go to Columbus, Ohio. They come back, they beat Ohio State 79-77. Georgia was going to the Final Four of the NIT tournament. And then, as amazing as that was, unfortunately, we did lose to Seton Hall 84-67 in a game where Georgia fought late, but it was just too much for that. The first half deficit was just way too much for the Dogs to come back from. And so yeah, that's Georgia's season, and now it's time for grades. And I give this season this was a wonderful season. If this season was a report paper, I'd give it I'd give it an A minus, and a lot of people I saw a lot of B's and C's. You don't know this program if you're giving this season a B or C. I mean, this was a huge step in the right direction for Georgia. You're talking about a team that has not played any postseason basketball since 2017, and they played postseason basketball this year. And dang, they almost won the championship. They lost to the team that would eventually go on to make the championship game. You have to look at the teams they beat. They beat Xavier, which is a Big East basketball school. They're always going to be great in basketball. They beat Wake Forest and Ohio State on the road, which are rowdy environments. A team, Georgia usually struggles on the road. Georgia does not win on the road. I thought, when they beat Wake Forest, I thought, okay, we got one road win, but then they managed to beat Ohio State. They got two. So, I mean, it was just crazy. We're going to have to bring back our freshman talent this year. Now, they'll be sophomores next year. We're going to bring back Blue. We're going to bring back Salias. We're going to bring back Dylan James. There's not many assistant coach, Akeem Dean. Of course, as we said yesterday, left for Michigan. So, at this time this is recorded, there has not been any transfer news. Of course, I'll update when that goes on. My thing though is, and people are making a big deal about bringing back the freshmen, and I absolutely agree. That's something we need to really do. But Georgia is going to have to find out a way. Justin Hill, Dupree Abdul-Rahim, Frank Anselm, and M.A. Moncrief. Georgia should make a big effort to bring back at least two of the four of those guys. I mean, especially if it's Justin and Jabri. Frank Anselm played really, really great this year as well, especially later down the stretch when Big Russell got sick in the NIT and Big Frank needed to carry his load, and he really did. He played really, really good in some of those games. But Georgia is going to have to figure out a way to bring some of those players back. I was really happy against Seton Hall. M.A. Moncrief scored a bucket, which was amazing. I love M.A. very, very much. I feel like he should have got more minutes, but that's just my opinion. And I'm not a head coach, so it really does not matter. But when 10 years from now, and maybe this Mike White thing does not work. Maybe this is the peak of the Mike White era. I hope not. But in the ever-changing landscape of college basketball, if this is the peak of the Mike White era, I will look at this as being a very fun season. This was a fun season, man. I mean, going from the Oregon game, from beating Georgia Tech, right? I mean, Georgia had not beat Georgia Tech since 2019-20. So, to beat Georgia Tech was awesome this year. To come back and beat Florida State was amazing. Starting out 2-0 in conference play, get wins versus Missouri and Arkansas, almost beating number 5 Tennessee. Coming back to beat South Carolina and LSU, almost beating Alabama. That horrible losing stretch Georgia went on to. I'm sorry, I have no idea what is causing that. And then, the big losing streak Georgia went on. I mean, it was crazy, man. It was... And then, winning games in the SEC tournament, and then making the NIT, and going to the semifinals of the NIT. I mean, this was an amazing season. Georgia fans should not take this season for granted. If this is the peak of the Mike White era in Athens, then we're going to look at this season many years from now, and we're going to say, I'm very glad this happened. I said it on Twitter. I mean, I went on a huge thread about this team. There will never be another team like this for me personally, for the University of Georgia, for the players and coaches. There will never be another season like this for me. And I won't make it about me. I mean, of course, we're never going to get to see Noel Thomason and Big Russ and Sonny Sinahara play at UGA again. We might not see Justin Jabri or any of the other guys play at UGA again. And that's what makes this special. It's like we will never witness this again. There'll never be another first. Now, when Georgia makes the NCAA tournament, that's going to be a wonderful day. But there's never going to be another first. There's never going to be another, like I had surgery. I was covering this team from my bed, half dead, on pills. I mean, like, there'll never be that feeling again of working through pain and stuff to cover this team. And then the recovery for me started, and the recovery started in around October. And then you're like, there'll never be any more of me going in and out of physical therapy, recording videos before physical therapy of Georgia playing Eastern Kentucky, and then the scrimmages stuff started. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm getting a little emotional. I am. I mean, and then November started, and then it's like they played Oregon, and then this season, for most Georgia fans, basketball is a secondary sport. This is the first sport for me, and this season has brought me many, many memories I will never forget in my life, and I hope for better memories next year. But I am very, very thankful for the ones I got now. I mean, it really breaks my heart that, the season had to end like it did. I could have been Georgia playing in the NIT championship yesterday night. It's just, this was a very unforgettable and fun season. This was a huge positive. If you look at everything in a huge way, if you look at it from, sure you can complain about the games we lost. Yes, we should have beat Tennessee. Yes, we should have beat Alabama. We should have beat Florida and Mississippi State once. Yes, I understand it. But when you look at everything, when you look at it overall in a positive standpoint, this was an amazing season, man. And that's what's going to hurt me the most. There'll never be nothing like this again. Anyway, what I was going to say is this was an amazing, amazing season. I will never forget this season as long as I live. The 2023-24 Georgia Bulldogs will be one of the basketball teams I remember for the rest of my life. Thank you, coaches. Thank you, players. Thank you, everybody who works for this team. This season was a wonderful, wonderful season, and I will never forget this. So, until 2024, that's the state of the program. Go Hoop Dogs.
The unthinkable, the unbelievable. They beat Arkansas and go wire to wire to win the SEC tournament.